The first time Rachel Morgan noticed him, he was on his knees. Not in defeat, but on the cold marble floor of her company lobby, sleeves rolled up quietly, fixing a broken panel while executives in tailored suits stepped over him like he didn't exist. Ethan Cole didn't look up. He never did. And Rachel, pressed for time, eyes glued to her phone, didn't spare him a glance either. To her, he was just another invisible man in a building full of people who mattered more. That was 3 weeks ago. Tonight, everything shattered. The restaurant was the kind where deals were made over million-dollar wines, where power dressed in silk and confidence. Rachel had come to close a merger that could redefine her empire, but instead, her world tilted for an entirely different reason. Across the room, under warm, golden light, she saw him. Ethan Cole. But not the man she thought she knew. He wasn't in a maintenance uniform. He wore a perfectly tailored black suit posture, calm presence commanding. And across from him sat a woman Rachel immediately recognized not just beautiful, but dangerous in the way powerful people are. Victoria Hale. A name whispered in boardrooms. A woman who represented billion-dollar interests and never wasted her time on nobodies. Yet here she was, leaning forward, smiling at Ethan, her hand brushing his like it belonged there. Rachel felt something sharp twist in her chest. Confusion first, then disbelief, then something far more unsettling. Because Ethan wasn't just sitting there. He was leading the conversation. Calm, intelligent, in control. The kind of control Rachel recognized instantly, the kind that came from someone who knew exactly how much power they held. Her breath slowed. This didn't make sense. Not the man who fixed broken wires. Not the quiet, single father she had ignored in passing. Not the man who left every day at exactly 5 p.m., as if nothing in the world mattered more than whatever waited for him outside those glass doors. So why was he here? With her? And why did it feel like Rachel was the only one who hadn't known who he really was all along? She told herself to look away, to return to her meeting, to focus on the billion-dollar deal waiting for her signature. But she couldn't. Because in that moment, watching Ethan laugh softly at something Victoria said, Rachel realized something that sent a chill through her entire body. She hadn't just overlooked a man. She had overlooked a secret. And whatever that secret was, it was about to change everything. The next morning, Rachel Morgan arrived at the headquarters of Morgan Dynamics earlier than usual, though she would never admit to herself why. The memory of the previous night clung to her like a shadow. She couldn't shake the image of Ethan Cole sitting across from Victoria Hale, composed, confident, and entirely out of place in the version of reality Rachel had constructed about him. She stepped out of her black town car heels, clicking sharply against the polished stone. As the glass doors slid open, the familiar scent of steel ambition and quiet pressure wrapping around her like armor. Everything here moved with precision. Every second accounted for every person measured by output and value. And yet for the first time in a long time, Rachel felt distracted. She didn't like that feeling. Not at all. Inside the lobby, a small group of junior executives parted instinctively as she passed, offering respectful nods she barely acknowledged. Her assistant Claire hurried toward her with a tablet in hand, already listing the day's meetings, but Rachel wasn't listening. Her eyes had already found him. Ethan was there again, kneeling by the same wall panel, sleeves rolled, fingers moving with quiet certainty as he worked. But now that she had seen him differently, everything about him looked different. The calm precision in his movements, the way he didn't rush, didn't fidget, didn't seem to care who was watching. He wasn't trying to impress anyone. He simply knew what he was doing. Rachel slowed just for a fraction of a second. Something Claire noticed immediately. "Is everything all right?" Claire asked softly, following her gaze. Rachel blinked, straightening her voice, returning to its usual controlled tone. "Yes, schedule," she said, cutting the moment off like it never existed. But even as she walked away, she could feel it, that subtle shift in her awareness. Ethan didn't look up. Not once. As if she wasn't worth noticing either. That more than anything unsettled her. Upstairs, the boardroom buzzed with tension. The upcoming merger with Helix Systems had everyone on edge, and Rachel thrived in that environment. Pressure sharpened her, focused her, made her unstoppable. She moved through the meeting like a storm, decisive, precise, commanding. Numbers, projections, risks, everything aligned under her control. And yet, even in the middle of negotiations, fragments of the previous night kept intruding. The way Ethan had leaned back in his chair, relaxed, unbothered. The way Victoria had listened to him, not the other way around. It didn't fit. It refused to fit. Rachel, one of the board members, prompted, pulling her back. She blinked, finishing her sentence flawlessly, no one noticing the brief lapse except herself. By the time the meeting ended, the deal was still intact, but Rachel's certainty was not. She dismissed everyone with a curt nod and remained alone in the boardroom, staring at the skyline stretching beyond the glass walls. For a moment, she allowed herself to think the thought she had been avoiding. "Who are you?" Ethan Cole. The question lingered as she turned and walked out her path, taking her almost unconsciously back toward the maintenance corridors. She told herself it was coincidence. It wasn't. Downstairs, Ethan had already finished his task. He was packing his tools into a worn but neatly organized kit movements, efficient, almost ritualistic. Rachel stopped a few feet away this time, close enough to speak. Close enough to see the faint lines of exhaustion around his eyes, the quiet strength in his posture. He looked up, then just briefly meeting her gaze for the first time. And for a split second, something passed between them. Recognition, perhaps. Or something deeper. But Ethan broke it first, nodding politely. "Ma'am," he said simply, his voice calm, respectful, but not submissive. Rachel wasn't used to that tone. People either feared her or tried to impress her. Ethan did neither. "You fixed the panel?" she asked, immediately irritated at how unnecessary the question sounded. He glanced at it, then back at her. Yes, that was it. No elaboration. No attempt to explain his process or showcase his skill. Just a simple answer. Rachel folded her arms, slightly studying him. "It reported that system glitch yesterday. It resolved this morning." Ethan paused for a fraction of a second. "Yes," he said again. This time there was something behind it, something unspoken. Rachel narrowed her eyes slightly. "That wasn't your department." Ethan met her gaze again, steady, unshaken. "Sometimes problems don't stay in their departments," he replied. It was a simple sentence, but it landed harder than it should have. Rachel felt a flicker of irritation mixed with something else she couldn't quite define. Before she could respond, Ethan had already lifted his toolbox. "If there's nothing else, I have another job to finish," he said, not waiting for permission, not lingering. And just like that, he walked past her. Rachel stood there, still watching him disappear down the hallway. No one walked away from her like that. No one. And yet Ethan had done it without hesitation, without disrespect. Simply, as if her presence didn't alter his priorities at all. Upstairs, the day continued, but Rachel's focus fractured more with each passing hour. Reports blurred together. Voices became background noise, and beneath it all was a growing sense that something important was slipping through her fingers. By late afternoon, she found herself doing something she hadn't done in years, leaving the office early. Not for rest, not for leisure, but because she needed air, needed space to think. The city greeted her with its usual chaos cars' voices, life moving at an unforgiving pace. Rachel walked without direction, heels echoing against the pavement, until she reached a quieter neighborhood, one she rarely visited. And that's when she saw him again. Ethan stood outside a small apartment building, holding the hand of a little girl. Lily Cole looked up at him with bright, trusting eyes, her small backpack slipping slightly off her shoulder. "Daddy, you're late," she said, though her tone held no accusation, only relief. Ethan crouched down immediately, adjusting the strap, his entire demeanor shifting in an instant. The guarded calm Rachel had seen at work softened into something warm, something deeply human. "I know, kiddo. I'm sorry," he said gently. "Did you wait long?" Lily shook her head. "Miss Carter stayed with me." Ethan smiled faintly. "Good. Let's get home." He took her hand, and as they walked inside, Lily began talking excitedly about her day school, a drawing she made, a story she wanted to tell. Ethan listened to every word, responding, asking questions, fully present in a way Rachel had never seen in anyone at Morgan Dynamics. Rachel stood across the street, frozen. This was the man she had ignored. Not just a maintenance worker. Not just the mysterious figure from the restaurant. But a father. A real one. The kind who showed up, who listened, who mattered. Something shifted inside her then, deeper than curiosity, deeper than suspicion. It was a quiet, uncomfortable realization. She had built her entire world on power control and precision, but standing there watching Ethan disappear into that modest building with his daughter Rachel felt something she hadn't felt in years. Uncertainty. And beneath it, something even more dangerous. Respect. The next morning, Rachel Morgan didn't wait for coincidence. She created it. By the time the sun cast its pale gold over the glass facade of Morgan Dynamics, she was already in her office, a steaming cup of untouched coffee, cooling beside a stack of reports she hadn't opened. Instead, her attention was fixed on a single file displayed on her screen: personnel records, internal logs, archived contracts, anything connected to Ethan Cole. It should have been simple. In her world, nothing stayed hidden. Everyone had a history, a trail, a measurable value. But Ethan's file felt wrong. Sparse where it should have been detailed. Clean where it should have been messy. No meaningful employment history before 5 years ago. No notable references. No academic records that aligned with the level of understanding she had witnessed. It was as if someone had taken a life and erased all the parts that mattered, leaving only a shell convincing enough to pass a surface check. Rachel leaned back slowly, her fingers steepled beneath her chin, her mind moving through possibilities with surgical precision. People hid things for a reason. Debt, crime, failure, or something far more valuable. A soft knock broke her focus as Claire stepped in, tablet-ready voice efficient. "Your 9 a.m. board prep is in 20 minutes. Legal wants confirmation on the Helix Clause revisions." Rachel didn't look away from the screen. "Delay it," she said calmly. Claire hesitated, surprised. "They're expecting—" "I said, delay it." The tone was final. Claire nodded and left without another word, though the subtle shift in Rachel's behavior didn't go unnoticed. Rachel closed the file and stood making a decision she rarely made she was going to see for herself. Downstairs, the maintenance corridor was quiet, the hum of hidden systems echoing faintly through the walls. Ethan was there exactly where he always seemed to be, as if he existed in the spaces no one else paid attention to. This time, he wasn't fixing anything obvious. He was standing in front of an open access panel, studying a cluster of cables and embedded processors with a level of focus that felt far too intense for routine work. Rachel didn't announce herself immediately. She watched, and what she saw confirmed what she already suspected. Ethan wasn't guessing. He wasn't troubleshooting blindly. He was analyzing, calculating, understanding the system in a way that mirrored the mindset of the engineers who had designed it no deeper than that, as if he had been there when it was built. "You're not just fixing things," Rachel said finally. Ethan didn't flinch. He didn't turn right away either. He finished what he was doing, tightening a connector, running a quick diagnostic check on a handheld device before closing the panel and standing. Only then did he face her. "Things need to work," he said simply. Rachel crossed her arms, her gaze sharp. "That's not what I asked." A pause. Ethan studied her for a brief moment as if weighing how much truth she was entitled to. "It's what matters," he replied. Rachel stepped closer, her heels echoing softly in the narrow space. "You were at Levere last night," she said. It wasn't a question. Ethan's expression didn't change, but there was a flicker, small, almost imperceptible. Yes, with Victoria Hale. This time he didn't respond immediately. Rachel took that silence as confirmation. Do you have any idea who she is? She pressed. Ethan met her gaze steadily. Yes. That answer landed differently. Not defensive, not impressed, just certain. Rachel felt a slow, creeping frustration build beneath her composure. Then you also know she doesn't sit down with maintenance staff over dinner. Ethan tilted his head slightly, a faint trace of something unreadable passing through his eyes. People sit down with whoever they choose to, he said. Rachel exhaled sharply. Not in my world. Ethan didn't respond to that. Instead, he reached for his toolbox, signaling the conversation was over from his perspective. And once again, he moved to leave. Stop? Rachel said the word sharper than she intended. Ethan paused, turning back slightly. Yes, for a moment. Rachel didn't know what to say. That had never happened before. Words were her weapon, her precision tool. But standing here facing a man who refused to play by her rules, she felt off balance. Who are you? She asked finally, her voice quieter now, stripped of its usual edge. Ethan held her gaze for a long second. Then he gave the only answer he was willing to give. Someone who knows when to leave things alone. And with that, he walked away. Rachel didn't stop him this time. She couldn't, because something in his tone told her that pushing further right now would only close whatever door had briefly opened. Back upstairs, the pressure she had postponed came crashing back. The Helix deal was unraveling. What had been a near-perfect acquisition now showed signs of instability. Data inconsistencies, conflicting projections, irregularities buried deep within the system architecture. Engineers argued over possible causes. Analysts scrambled to reinterpret numbers, and the board demanded answers Rachel didn't yet have. We're looking at a potential loss of $200 million if this collapses, one executive stated bluntly during the emergency meeting. Rachel stood at the head of the table, outwardly composed, but internally something clicked into place. The system. The same system Ethan had been quietly observing. The same system that had fixed itself just yesterday. Run a full diagnostic sweep on the integration layers, she ordered. We already did, another replied. Then do it again, Rachel said, her tone leaving no room for argument. As the room buzzed with renewed urgency, Rachel's mind wasn't on the numbers anymore. It was on Ethan. Hours passed. Nothing changed. The problem persisted, growing more complex, more dangerous. By late afternoon, the situation had escalated from concern to crisis. Rachel stood alone in the server room, the low hum of machines surrounding her, the weight of potential failure pressing in. And then she saw it. A small anomaly in the system logs, a pattern that didn't match the rest. It was subtle, almost invisible. But it was there, and it reminded her of something, someone. Without hesitating, she turned and walked straight back to the maintenance level. Ethan was there again. Of course he was. This time he looked up before she spoke, as if he had been expecting her. There's a fault in the integration layer, Rachel said, skipping everything else. It's not random. It's structured. Ethan didn't answer immediately. Instead, he studied her face, reading something beneath her words. And you think I know about it? He said. I think you've already seen it, Rachel corrected. A silence stretched between them, heavy with implication. Finally, Ethan set down his tools. Show me, he said. Back in the server room, the tension was almost tangible. Rachel pulled up the logs, pointing to the anomaly. Here, she said, it repeats, but not in a way that matches the system's design. Ethan leaned in slightly, his eyes scanning the data. And then, for the first time since she had known him, Rachel saw it clearly. Recognition. Not discovery. Not confusion. Recognition. He knew exactly what he was looking at. This wasn't an accident, Ethan said quietly. Rachel's pulse quickened. What is it? He straightened his expression, shifting no longer just calm, but serious. Focused in a way that carried weight. "It's a back door," he said. The word hung in the air like a threat. Rachel's mind raced. "Who put it there?" she demanded. Ethan didn't answer right away. Instead, he looked at her with something that almost resembled a warning. "That depends," he said slowly, "on how much you really want to know." Rachel held his gaze unwavering. Everything she said. And in that moment, something changed. Not in the system, not in the company, but between them. Because for the first time, Ethan didn't look away. And Rachel realized she had just stepped into something far bigger than a failing deal, far more dangerous than a hidden flaw. Whatever secret Ethan had been carrying, it wasn't buried anymore. The word lingered in the air like a quiet detonation back door, and for the first time since she built Morgan Dynamics from the ground up, Rachel Morgan felt something dangerously close to losing control. She didn't show it, of course. Her posture remained perfect, her expression unreadable. But inside, her thoughts accelerated with ruthless clarity because a hidden access point inside a system of this scale didn't just mean vulnerability, it meant intent. And intent meant someone had been playing a longer, smarter game than anyone in her company had realized, including her. Across from her, Ethan Cole stood still, his gaze fixed on the cascading data, the faint glow of the servers reflecting in his eyes, and in that moment, he didn't look like maintenance staff. He looked like the only person in the room who fully understood the battlefield. Rachel took a slow breath, steadying herself. "Explain it," she said, her voice low but commanding, and Ethan's response came without hesitation. "It's not just a back door, it's layered. Whoever built this knew the system's architecture at its core level. They embedded access points that activate under specific conditions, meaning this wasn't planted after deployment, it was built into the foundation." Rachel's mind snapped to one terrifying conclusion. "An inside job," she said, and Ethan didn't confirm it with words, but the silence that followed said enough. A flicker of anger surged through her. Not the explosive kind, but the cold, precise anger that fueled her most dangerous decisions. "No one on my current team could design something like this without leaving a trace," she said. And Ethan finally looked at her directly. "That's because the person who designed it isn't on your current team," he replied. And the weight of that sentence shifted everything. Rachel stepped closer, narrowing the distance between them. "Then who?" she demanded. And Ethan held her gaze for a long second before answering. "Someone who built the original system." The implication hit her instantly. The system Morgan Dynamics relied on wasn't something her current engineers had created from scratch. It had been acquired years ago, scaled, modified, optimized, but never fundamentally rebuilt. And suddenly, every assumption she had trusted began to fracture. "You're saying the vulnerability has been there from the beginning?" she asked, and Ethan nodded once. "Hidden well enough that no one noticed until now," he said, then added quietly, "or until someone decided it was time to use it." The room seemed to tighten around them, the hum of the servers turning into a low, oppressive sound. Rachel's instincts kicked in fully now. "If someone can access our system through this..." "What can they do?" she asked, and Ethan didn't soften the truth. Anything, he said, simply. "They can manipulate data, reroute transactions, collapse integrations. Make it look like internal failure while they pull value out from underneath you." Rachel's jaw tightened. "Helix," she whispered, connecting the final piece. The merger wasn't just failing, it was being sabotaged, engineered to collapse at the exact moment of maximum exposure. Before she could respond, alarms flickered across the system interface. Not loud, not dramatic, but subtle warnings that something was shifting again. Rachel turned to the console, her fingers moving rapidly. "It's happening now," she said, and Ethan stepped beside her. No hesitation, no permission needed his presence, no longer an anomaly but a necessity. Data streams began to distort projections, shifting in real time. numbers that had been stable minutes ago now fluctuating unpredictably. "They're triggering the back door," Ethan said, his tone sharpening, testing control before executing the full breach. Rachel's voice cut through the rising tension. "Can you stop it?" she asked, and Ethan didn't answer immediately. His eyes scanning, calculating, mapping the system in ways no one else could. Then finally, "Yes, but not from here," he said. "I need direct access to the core architecture, not the surface-level interface your engineers use." Rachel turned to him fully now. "Then you have it," she said without hesitation, a decision that would have been unthinkable hours ago but now felt inevitable necessary. "Claire," she called through her comm, "clear the executive server room. Full access authorization for Ethan Cole, effective immediately." There was a pause on the other end, then a cautious, "Rachel, are you sure?" "Do it," Rachel said, and the line went silent. Minutes later, they stood in the restricted core chamber, a space few people in the company had ever seen, where the real foundation of Morgan Dynamics pulsed with controlled power. Ethan moved toward the central console, his demeanor shifting again. Not hesitant, not uncertain, but precise, deliberate, like someone returning to a place they once knew intimately. Rachel watched him closely, every movement reinforcing what she had already begun to accept. This man didn't just understand the system, he belonged to it. "You've done this before," she said quietly. And Ethan's hands paused for just a fraction of a second before continuing. "Yes," he admitted, and that single word carried more weight than any explanation. Rachel stepped closer, her voice lowering. "You didn't just work on this system," she said. "You built it." And this time, Ethan didn't deny it. He simply said, "Part of it," but Rachel knew better, the confidence, the precision. The instinctive understanding it wasn't partial, it was foundational. "Why are you here?" she asked, the question deeper now. No longer about job titles or roles, but about choices. And Ethan's answer came without looking at her. "Because I needed to disappear," he said. And for the first time, there was something in his voice that wasn't control. Something quieter, heavier. And because some things are more important than being seen, Rachel thought of Lily Cole, the small hand in his, the warmth she had witnessed, and suddenly the pieces aligned in a way that had nothing to do with business and everything to do with survival. Before she could respond, the system spiked again, more aggressively this time, lines of code shifting. Pathways opening where none should exist. "They're escalating," Ethan said sharply, trying to gain full control. His fingers moved faster now, bypassing layers of security, rewriting segments of code in real time, not as an outsider hacking in, but as an architect, reclaiming control over his own creation. Rachel watched, not interfering, not questioning, because for the first time she understood her role wasn't to lead this moment, it was to trust it. Seconds stretched into minutes, tension building as the system fought back against the intrusion. Then suddenly the fluctuations stabilized. The anomalies stopped spreading. The backdoor pathways began to collapse one by one under Ethan's control, until finally silence, not empty but controlled, restored. Ethan exhaled slowly, stepping back from the console. "It's contained," he said, and Rachel felt something shift inside her again. Not relief exactly, but recognition of what had just happened, of who had just made it happen. "Whoever did this will try again," she said, already thinking ahead, and Ethan nodded. "Yes, but now they know someone is watching," he replied. Rachel studied him. The man she had ignored, underestimated, dismissed, now standing in the center of her company's survival, and she realized the reversal wasn't just external, it was internal. Her understanding of power, of value, of people had been incomplete. "You could have let it fail," she said quietly. "You could have walked away." Ethan met her gaze calm as ever. "And let everyone else pay the price?" he asked, then shook his head slightly. "That's not how I work." Rachel held his gaze, something unspoken passing between them. Not dominance, not submission, but something far more rare, mutual respect. But beneath that, another realization settled in, heavier, more personal, because now she understood not just who Ethan was, but why seeing him with another woman had unsettled her so deeply. It wasn't jealousy in the way she had first assumed, it was the shock of realizing she had completely misjudged someone who might be more important than she had ever allowed herself to consider, and now that she finally saw him clearly, everything had already changed. In the days that followed, the storm inside Morgan Dynamics slowly settled, but something deeper had already shifted. Something no report, no board meeting, no financial recovery could fully capture. Rachel Morgan stood alone in her office one evening, the city glowing beneath her like a living network of ambition and consequence. Yet for the first time in years, she wasn't thinking about expansion or control. She was thinking about a quiet man who had never once asked for recognition and still chose to save everything she had built. Across town, Ethan Cole sat at a small kitchen table, helping Lily Cole finish her homework. His world reduced to something simple, something real, something that didn't need validation from anyone else. When Rachel knocked on his door that evening, it wasn't as a CEO, it wasn't as someone in power, it was as a person finally willing to admit she had been wrong. Ethan opened the door, surprised but calm, and for a moment neither of them spoke because everything that mattered had already happened. "I came to say thank you," Rachel said finally, her voice softer than he had ever heard it, stripped of authority, stripped of distance, and "I came to understand." Ethan studied her for a second, then stepped aside, letting her in, not as a subordinate inviting a superior, but as one human allowing another into his space. Lily peeked from behind the table, curious, and Rachel offered a small, unfamiliar smile, the kind she never used in boardrooms. "Your company is safe now," Ethan said simply, as if it had never been in doubt, and Rachel nodded, but her eyes didn't leave him. "It was never just the company," she replied quietly. "I misjudged you. Completely." Ethan didn't rush to correct her, didn't soften the truth. He just said, "You saw what you expected to see, and somehow that hurt more than blame would have." Rachel glanced around the modest apartment, the drawings on the wall, the warmth she had never allowed into her own life, and she understood then why he had chosen this, why he had walked away from power without regret. "Why didn't you come back?" she asked, not as a demand but as a question. She needed answered, and Ethan looked at Lily, who was now laughing softly at something on her notebook, before replying. "Because I already have everything that matters," and in that moment, Rachel realized success had never been about what she thought it was. She exhaled slowly, something inside her finally letting go. "If you ever change your mind, there's a place for you," she said, not as an offer of power, but as an acknowledgement of worth. And Ethan gave a small nod. Not accepting, not refusing, just understanding. As Rachel turned to leave, Lily waved at her, and Rachel waved back a simple gesture that felt strangely significant, like the beginning of something she didn't fully understand yet. Outside, the night air felt different, lighter, and for the first time in a long time, Rachel didn't feel the need to control what came next. Because sometimes, the greatest shift in power isn't when you win, it's when you finally learn to see people for who they truly are and choose to change because of it.